The Goblins of Griddlestone Gap by Philip Steele. Bob Goblin and Slob Goblin were hobgoblins, and they knew everything that went on at Griddlestone Gap. Why, there had been hobgoblins in the gap since giants live in the forest and wolves ran free on the hills. Now, for those of you who don't know, hobgoblins are always up to one mischief or another. And at Griddlestone Gap it was no different. Their long bony fingers lifted latches and knocked on doors or scrabbled at windows to frighten honest people. Children would pull bedclothes over their hoods and say, "Gribbledy, grubbledy goblins, mean as mean can be. Gribbledy, grubbledy goblins, don't say boo to me." This was a bit unfair because goblins were not really mean, just very, very naughty. Bob Goblin and Slob Goblin were twins, and young twins at that, for they were only 303 and a half years old. And over the years they had got up to all kinds of tricks. They had tied together the parson's shoelaces so that he tripped over as he climbed into the pulpit. They had moved a scarecrow from the field and set it down by the fire in the local inn. And they had removed all the pegs so the tents collapsed at the village fit. How the villagers had gawped! Of the two, Slob Goblin was the craftiest and clever with it. He could write rhymes in perfect gobbledygook and cast spells on special days of the year. Bob Goblin was the most handsome. He had the bandiest legs, the most pointed ears, and eyes which glowed like Halloween lanterns. One fine morning Bob and Slob were sitting on a gate, sucking some eggs they had snicked from the hen house. "Have you heard, Slob?" said Bob. "Heard what, Bob?" said Slob. "They've built a new house at the end of Griddlestone Gap." "Oh, they have they?" said Slob, arching his eyebrows. He began to giggle and then to chuckle. "Shall we goblinize them then?" He croaked gleefully, and with that the hobgoblins went into a huddle and whispered secretly to each other. That evening Mr. Mulberry was taking the air outside his splendid new house. The thatch was trimmed, the timber strong, and the garden as neat and tidy as could be. "Mr. Mulberry of Griddlestone Hall," he said to himself, savoring the sound of the words with pride. Then suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he thought he saw something slip through the grass and a window rattle behind him. "Mrs. M," he bellowed, striding back indoors. "Did you hear something just then?" "Not a thing, dearest," said his wife as she came out of the dining hall. "Now come and eat your supper, or it will get cold." Inside the table was piled high with Mr. Mulberry's favorite dishes. He eased himself into a chair and leaned forward to sniff the yellow roses which decorated the table. Mr. Mulberry sneezed. "Pepper!" he exclaimed when he'd recovered enough to talk. "There's pepper on those roses, or I'm a cabbage." "Don't be ridiculous, dearest," said Mrs. Mulberry with a pitying look. "You've probably got a cold coming. Now then, have a nice bowl of soup." As she lifted the lid of the tureen, a green frog leaped out, hopped across the tablecloth, and out of the window. Mr. Mulberry screamed. Their first meal at Griddlestone Hall was not a success. There was ink in the gravy boat, salt in the custard, and cod liver oil in the pork. And that was not all. When he went to bed, Mr. Mulberry found spiders in his nightcap, and the bedclothes turned over at both ends. all night long there was squeaking and a creaking, a hammering and a yammering. By 4 in the morning he could stand it no more. "Hobgoblins!" he shouted. Mrs. M awoke with a start. "I beg your pardon?" she said. "Hobgoblins!" repeated Mr. Mulberry. "If this isn't the work of hobgoblins, my name is not Marmaduke Mulberry, and I am going to catch them." Mr. Mulberry put on his slippers and he put on his dressing gown and he crept downstairs. In the pantry he could see a candle burning. He tiptoed in very softly. There were Bobgoblin and Slobgoblin, bold as brass, sitting on a barrel of apricots. In a trice, Mr. Mulberry tipped them in and slammed the lid down on the barrel. Carrying it over his shoulder, he ran out into the garden and threw it down the well. "And that is the end of that," he said triumphantly. But Mr. Mulberry knew little of hobgoblin habits. To a goblin, a well is the most perfect little home imaginable. "Just the place to settle down," said Bobgoblin to Slobgoblin, climbing from the barrel and sitting on a stone ledge. "Home, sweet home," said Slobgoblin to Bobgoblin as he spat out an apricot stone. So for many a long year the happy hobgoblins lived in the well at Griddlestone Hall, and they were so busy tidying up their new home that they hardly had time to play pranks. They still live there today, it is said, but now they are old and gray and slip away the days. But once in a while, visitors to the hall hear knocks and bangs in the wainscoting, and window panes rattle on windless nights. And the children in the village still put bedclothes over their heads and say, "Gribbledy, grubbledy goblins, mean as mean can be. Gribbledy, grubbledy goblins, don't say boo to me."